Awesome. Okay, so for folks who get the weekly reminders and read them, today I thought we'd work with concentration. Last week we worked with sensory clarity. Shinzen Young, my teacher, would say that mindfulness meditation is basically three attention skills working together. Concentration being one, sensory clarity the second, and equanimity, really what we're essentially all going for is building that okayness with whatever's happening in our experience. So last week, sensory clarity, let's play with concentration practices. There's more than one way to work with developing this skill, and a skill that's relevant to probably most things we do in life on a very practical level. If I'm better concentrated, I'm a safer driver. I'm going to more skillfully use my chopping knife when I'm prepping dinner. I'm going to be able to pay attention more in conversation, not get so lost in my own thoughts or drift. Most things, not everything, but most things are improved when we're more highly concentrated or have the choice to be when we want to be. But there's a deeper way that concentration helps us to become less identified with our experiences. We get very caught, often not super consciously, by thoughts. We experience a lot of our sensations as very solid, including ourselves as a person, this solid, separate entity or person having experiences. And when we can develop higher levels of concentration, it supports that sensory clarity that reveals to us that it's a lot more fluid than that. And just generally experiences that might feel very sticky and heavy and kind of give weight to these ideas of these solid, permanent experiences, they can thin out, which all supports equanimity. So let's start practicing, and I'll walk us through a couple of ways to work with concentration. Once you've settled in, bringing your attention to your posture, making any adjustments you feel would be most helpful for you and your practice. Eyes open or closed. Let's bring our attention into the body space. So our focus range is physical sensations. And we're going to work here in two ways. One, by focusing on something kind of small. That could be the area of the nostrils. It's a pretty classic area of the body, sensation to focus on related to the breath. So we're really zooming in and concentrating on this very small sliver of our experience. To the exclusion of everything else, as best as we're able to do that. Mind wanders, it likely will eventually. We have this sensation to bring it back to this small area of the body to focus on. I'm going to invite us to try to maintain our focus here for, let's say, another 8 minutes. And this is a more sustained concentration practice. We are holding our attention in one place, either for a certain amount of time, fairly long time, could be the whole practice, could be for years, or we stay with it until it ends. It's not going to end in this case because we're breathing, but I could have a sustained practice, for example, listening to a piece of music or an album, and it ends. Choosing the nostrils is an option if you feel like there's a different part of the body you want to focus on, particular sensation. Feel free to choose somewhere else. But I would recommend it's a small area. That's what we're deliberately working with at this point. You may notice how concentration is supporting your sensory clarity. You're noticing details about your experience that you would otherwise not have noticed. So it's bringing light to aspects of our experience that weren't conscious until we held our attention there. If you find your concentration's not super stable, getting easily distracted, using a label can help get more traction. So you could use the label even nostrils or breath, In Shinzen system, he has a more general label. It's usually recommended is feel. This is a physical sensation that we're focusing on. Just finding whatever works for you and kind of using a label at whatever pace works for you to kind of remind yourself where you intend to focus. Because we can't hear each other on the call, you could say that out loud as well. Okay, so we're going to transition from this pretty small object that we were concentrating on to something quite larger, the entire body space. So we can feel this zooming out of the lens of our attention. And there could be quite a bit going on here. Some active sensations, parts of the body that might feel more neutral or restful. So we're not going to hone in on any particular sensation, but try to maintain this more open, broad coverage, but still concentrating only on the body space, letting thought activity, sounds in the environment to be in the background. Sometimes it can help to feel like your attention is going right to the outer boundary of your body, even a bit beyond. And letting the symphony of the arising and passing sensations, the constantly changing landscape of this felt sense of our body happen. Paying attention with a very welcoming, friendly stance, which helps cultivate equanimity. Try not to argue with what's going on in there. Nothing needs to be different in this moment. So we're going to work on developing our concentration with this broader focus for about the next 7 minutes. You might notice with this more broad coverage that you're enjoying some tranquility in the body. Maybe perceived boundaries seem to be dissolving a bit or thinning out. You might be noticing some flow of energy. So these are rewarding states that we can continue to focus on and enjoy. Whether they're subtle or intense. If the body is feeling less and less solid and present, we can notice that. Focus on that quality, perhaps, of more spaciousness, more neutrality. less definition. And the body might feel very ordinary, and that's perfect as well. As long as our focus is being held or returned back to this chosen focus range. Okay, so we're going to shift gears again. If that feels interesting for you to explore, feel free to stay with the practice if you're riding a really good wave, to a momentary concentration practice. So these have been sustained concentration, holding our attention, whether it was on a little space or a much bigger space of the body. So here we're going to, again, for now, keep the attention limited to body sensations, but we're going to let it freely float and land on or zoom in on a particular part of the body, sensation, and we're going to stay there just for like seconds, like maybe 10, 20 seconds. Really, the pacing is up to you, and soak into it. So we're going to try to be as highly concentrated as we can for that short time. And that, of course, again, will help make available that sensory clarity, noticing perhaps more and more subtle aspects of our experience, helping us appreciate the flowing nature, the impermanence, um, different qualities that we might not have otherwise detected. And after that short time, we release the attention from that sensation. Again, attention floats freely, and the attention might just be drawn to a sensation spontaneously. If it feels like there's a few places our attention could go, just choose one. Or we might deliberately place the attention if there's something we're interested in working with. But really, bringing that intention of these short bursts of highly concentrated contact and then moving on. Try to let go of any preference for sensations to be pleasant, being open to whatever we find. We might notice our attention going to a very, again, small part of the body. Maybe there's an itch somewhere that your attention is drawn to, or it could be larger. Perhaps you're noticing the torso expanding and contracting with the breathing cycle. The use of labels might be particularly helpful here. As soon as your attention lands, you can label that generally as feel. It's a feeling or sensation, and soak into it. Or you could use a more specific label, fingers, head. I like the general label. I feel like it builds more equanimity. We're letting go of the need to differentiate what part of the body. But if it's helpful, it's whatever works. And if your attention keeps returning back to the same place, that's perfectly fine. Try to keep whatever you're focusing on in the foreground, everything else in the background. It's like we're placing a spotlight on that one sliver of our experience. So, for the last 10 minutes of our practice, I'm going to invite you to practice in whatever way feels most interesting and productive. You can perhaps appreciate how that momentary concentration that we just worked with could really open up all of life to practice. Virtually any activity we would engage with in life, we could bring an intentional meditation technique in these short, highly concentrated bursts, which still develops these skills that we're looking to cultivate. So, whether you want to work with a sustained focus on a particular meditation object or space, including beyond the feeling in the body, so work with sound, mental activity, or you may want to continue with the more momentary model, which also includes now what we hear, outer environment, perhaps mental talk, and what we see. And I think most of us have probably maybe been around for when I've taught see, hear, feel. So you could open up your attention to all aspects of our experience. And then choose to focus on one thread, whether that's a see, something in the visual experience, hear, HEAR, in the auditory, or feel as we've been doing, and really narrow our attention for that short time on that particular thread. We've all had the experience of merging with an object or experience, whether we get lost in a beautiful piece of music or we get so engaged in a movie we're seeing, we kind of disappear. We lose ourselves into it. For an artist or a dancer, there can be this collapse. But it can happen during pretty ordinary experiences. Maybe we do hot, cold showers, and the experience of the cold is so intense, it takes over all the bandwidth of our attention. There's just this experience of cold. When we practice in this way, we can be very present for that merging. For that feeling of oneness, whatever it is we're highly concentrated on. So you may be getting flavors of that during your practice. If all or most of our attention is soaked into a physical sensation, sound, or image, the sense of a you needs to decrease. There's only limited real estate with our attention. So we can notice how absorbed we can become when we're highly concentrated. Into what it is we're focusing on. Okay, we'll bring the practice to a close gently. If your eyes aren't already open, feel free to open them now. Body might want to move a bit.